Hello there. I am so glad you joined me today. Take a moment to settle in. Find a comfortable place, perhaps a soft chair or a quiet corner. Let the world outside fade away. Today, I want to tell you a story that is not just about a journey, but about the very way we see the world. It is a story about a man who lived in a valley of shadows, but carried a light in his heart that he did not yet understand. But on this specific morning, something was different. The air felt heavy, and the silence was unusual. In the heart of the great, jagged mountains lived a community in a place called the Valley of Echoes. In this valley, life was a circle. It was a perfect, repetitive circle. Everything was a shade of gray. The stone houses, the dusty roads, and even the heavy mist that sat on the rooftops like a cold, wet cat. The people of the valley were very proud of their gray world. They believed that color was dangerous, and that change was a ghost that only brought trouble. They lived by one rule: if it was good enough for our fathers, it is good enough for us. Elias was a weaver in this village. He was a young man with quiet eyes and hands that were always stained with the oils of the loom. Every single day, from the moment the sun touched the mountain peaks until the stars appeared, Elias sat at his wooden machine. Click-clack, click-clack. He wove gray threads into gray cloth. He was a master of his craft. He was a very patient weaver. But while his hands moved with precision, his mind was a traveler. He often felt a strange, quiet hunger in his soul, a hunger for something he could not name. One Tuesday morning, the mist was thicker than Elias had ever seen. It was so thick he could not see his own feet as he walked to his workshop. He reached into the pocket of his old worn apron to find his wooden shuttle. But instead of wood, his fingers touched something cold, something metallic, something alive. Elias pulled his hand out and gasped. In his palm lay a small silver key. It was unlike anything in the valley. It was bright. It was shining. It was beautiful. As he held it, he noticed that the key was humming, a very soft, warm vibration that moved up his arm and into his heart. For a second, just a second, the gray mist around him seemed to turn into a pale, glowing blue. Elias felt a sudden, sharp chill. He looked at the gray walls of his workshop. Then, he looked up at the mountains that no one ever climbed. He realized that his life was no longer a circle. The circle had been broken. He did not know that this small piece of silver would be the end of his peace and the beginning of his destiny. He did not know that the world he knew was about to vanish. But the key was not just an object. It was an invitation. Elias stood frozen in the middle of the street. His heart was beating like a trapped bird. He quickly closed his hand, hiding the silver key from the world. He felt like he was carrying a secret sun in his pocket. He continued walking toward the great weaving hall, but every step felt heavier than the one before. The gray cobblestones seemed harder. The gray faces of his neighbors seemed empty. Usually, the predictability of the valley felt safe. Today, it felt like a cage. He entered the hall. It was a massive stone building where 50 weavers sat in 50 rows. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of 50 looms was like the heartbeat of a giant. For 10 years, this sound had been Elias's comfort. It was the sound of normal, but as he sat down at his machine and touched the gray wool, his fingers felt numb. The wool felt like dry grass. It was dull. It was lifeless. "Elias," a voice whispered. It was a sharp, dry voice, like dead leaves moving on the ground. Elias looked up. Standing over him was Master Kale, the elder of the weavers. Kale was a man who had not smiled in 40 years. His eyes were the color of cold ash. He looked at Elias's hands, which were resting uselessly on the loom. "You are not weaving, Elias," Kale said. His voice was narrow. "The rhythm is broken. Why is your machine silent?" I was just thinking, Master," Elias replied. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "Do you ever feel that the wool could be more? Do you ever wonder if there are colors hidden beneath the gray? Do you ever hear a music that doesn't come from the looms?" The great hall went silent. One by one, The other weavers stopped their work. The silence was heavy. It was a dangerous silence. Master Kale leaned down, his face only inches from Elias's. Elias could smell the old dust on Kale's clothes. Colors are for dreamers, and dreamers are for the wilderness, Kale whispered harshly. We are weavers of reality. We weave the gray because the gray is what we know. The gray is what keeps us warm. The gray is the truth. If you look for colors, you will find only madness. Keep your eyes on the ground, Elias. The ground is where the path is. Do not look at the mountains. Do not listen to the wind. Elias looked down at his gray wool. He tried to weave. He tried to force his hands to follow the old pattern. But the silver key in his pocket seemed to grow hot against his leg. It was as if the key was protesting. It was as if the key was saying, "This is not who you are." That afternoon, Elias did not speak to anyone. He felt a deep, quiet sadness growing inside him. A sadness for his people, and a sadness for himself. He realized that the people of the valley were not just living in gray. They were becoming gray. Their thoughts were gray. Their dreams were gray. Their futures were gray. When he finally walked home that evening, the sun was sinking behind the forbidden peaks. He sat in his small dark kitchen. He did not light a lamp. He took the silver key out and laid it on the rough wooden table. In the darkness, the key did not fade. Instead, it began to pulse. Light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. It was like a second heart. And then he heard it. A faint, beautiful sound, like a distant choir singing in a language that felt more real than his own. He thought he was safe in his house. He thought he could wait until morning to decide. But he was wrong. This quiet discomfort was about to become a storm that would tear his world apart. The next morning, Elias did not want to wake up. He wanted to stay in the world of his dreams, where the colors were bright and the air was warm. But the sun rose anyway, a pale, weak sun that could not break through the thick gray mist of the valley. Elias looked at the silver key on his table. It looked different in the morning light. It looked dangerous. It was a beautiful danger. He decided he could not go back to the weaving hall yet. He needed answers. He remembered an old building at the edge of the village, a place no one visited anymore, the Hall of Records. It was a library filled with heavy, dusty books that held the history of the valley. Perhaps, Elias thought, someone before me found a key. Perhaps I am not the first one to dream in color. As he walked through the village, he saw his friend, Sarah. Sarah was a gardener. She spent her days tending to gray vegetables and gray flowers. She was a kind woman with a tired smile. "Elias," she called out, her voice soft. "You look like you haven't slept. Your eyes are wandering again. Are you okay?" Elias hesitated. His heart wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to show her the silver key and say, "Look, there is more than this." But he remembered Master Kale's warning. He remembered the cold silence of the weavers. "Sarah," Elias whispered, stepping closer, "do you ever feel like we are waiting for something? Something that is already here, but we just can't see it? Like a language we forgot how to speak?" Sarah's smile faded. She looked around nervously, checking if any neighbors were listening. "Elias, please," she whispered, "do not say such things. The mist is part of us. The gray is our protection. If you keep looking for things that aren't there, you will only find trouble. My mother used to say that the mountains eat the people who dream." "But what if the mountains are not the end?" Elias asked. "What if they are just the beginning?" Sarah shook her head sadly. "Go to work, Elias. Keep your eyes on the ground. It is safer that way." Elias felt a sharp pang of loneliness. Even his friend was afraid of the light. He left her and hurried to the Hall of Records. The building was cold and smelled of damp paper. He searched through the old, crumbling books for hours. He looked for words like silver, destiny, or the beyond, but he found nothing. It was as if someone had gone through the books and cut out every page that mentioned the sun. There was only one book left, a very old diary at the bottom of a dark shelf. He opened it and his heart stopped. On the very first page, there was a drawing of a key. It was his key. Under the drawing, a single sentence was written in shaky, faded ink. The key does not open a door in the world. It opens the person who carries it. But beware, once you turn the key, the gray will become a desert, and you will never be able to call it home again. Suddenly, the heavy door of the library creaked open. The gray light of the afternoon spilled onto the floor. Elias quickly hid the book under his coat. "Elias," a voice boomed. It was Master Kale. He was standing in the doorway, his tall, thin frame blocking the light. "The weaving hall is empty. Your loom is silent. And here you are, in a room full of dead words. What are you looking for, weaver?" Elias felt the silver key in his pocket grow icy cold. He realized he had made a mistake. He had shown his curiosity, and, in the Valley of Echoes, curiosity was a crime. He thought he still had time to decide. He thought he could live a double life, but as Kale stepped into the room, Elias realized he was wrong. He was very wrong. The air in the Hall of Records felt like it was freezing. Master Kale walked slowly toward Elias, his boots making a heavy thud-thud sound on the wooden floor. Every step felt like a drumbeat of judgment. "You have been different lately, Elias," Kale said, his voice as sharp as a needle. "You speak of colors, you look at the mountains, and now you are hiding things under your coat." "Give it to me." "It is just an old book, Master," Elias said, his voice trembling. "There are no just books in this valley," Kale replied. He reached out and snatched the diary from Elias. He looked at the drawing of the silver key and, for a moment, Elias saw something strange in Kale's eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. Kale was afraid of the key. "This," Kale said, his voice shaking with rage, "is a disease. This destiny you seek is a poison that killed your ancestors. I will not let it kill you. Men, take him." Two strong men stepped out from the shadows behind Kale. They grabbed Elias by the arms. Elias struggled, but they were too strong. They dragged him out of the library and toward the center of the village. The villagers gathered to watch, their faces pale and expressionless in the gray mist. Sarah was there too. She looked at Elias with tears in her eyes, but she stayed silent. She stayed in the gray. "Elias the Weaver has been infected by dreams," Kale shouted to the crowd. "He must be cleansed. We will take him to the Bridge of Whispers. If he loves the mountains so much, let him live in them." The Bridge of Whispers was a narrow, wooden bridge that crossed a deep, black canyon at the very edge of the valley. Beyond the bridge lay the wilderness, a place of jagged rocks and eternal storms. No one who crossed the bridge ever returned. They dragged Elias to the edge of the canyon. The wind howled like a hungry animal. Below, the river roared over sharp stones. Kale pushed Elias toward the bridge. "Cross it," Kale commanded. "Go to your city of silver. Go to your dreams. But know this, once you step onto that wood, the Valley of Echoes is dead to you. You will have no home. You will have no name. You will have nothing but the cold." Elias looked back at the village. He saw his loom. He saw his gray house. He saw the people he had known his whole life. For a second, he wanted to scream, "I'm sorry. I will be gray again. I will keep my eyes on the ground." But then, he felt it. The silver key in his pocket began to pulse. It wasn't cold anymore. It was burning with a fierce, defiant heat. It was the only warm thing in the world. Elias realized that his home had always been a prison. He realized that the safety Kale spoke of was just a slow death. Elias took a deep breath. He didn't look at the ground, he looked straight ahead, at the dark, misty mountains. He took his first step onto the swaying wood of the bridge. "Goodbye, Master Kale," Elias said, his voice now calm and strong. "I would rather die searching for the sun than live weaving the mist." He began to run. Behind him, he heard Kale screaming for the men to cut the ropes. The bridge began to shake violently. The wood began to crack. Snap. Crack. Elias didn't look back. He jumped. By the time the sun went down, nothing in his life would be the same. He was no longer a weaver. He was a traveler, and the hardest part of his journey was only just beginning. The world on the other side of the bridge was not what Elias expected. There was no instant sun, no sudden warmth. Instead, there was a vast, silent wilderness of twisted trees and sharp black rocks. The mist of the valley was gone, replaced by a cold, biting wind that tasted of salt and ancient dust. Elias walked for days. His boots, designed for the flat floors of the weaving hall, were now torn and thin. His feet bled, and his stomach groaned with a deep, empty hunger. This was the middle of the journey, the long, quiet stretch where the excitement of leaving is gone and the destination is still invisible. In his mind, a voice began to whisper. It sounded like Master Kale. You were a master weaver, Elias. You had a warm bed. You had a home. Now you have nothing but rocks and shadows. Was it worth it? Was a dream worth this pain? He entered a place called the Forest of Forgotten Tongues. The trees here were silver gray, their branches reaching out like thin, desperate fingers. As the wind blew through them, the trees made sounds that felt like half-finished sentences, like a language that was almost understood, but always out of reach. On the third night, as Elias huddled under a rocky ledge to escape the rain, a figure appeared from the darkness. It was a man, old and bent, carrying a lantern that flickered with a weak, green light. He sat down across from Elias without saying a word. "Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice dry and raspy. "I am the traveler of mirrors," the man replied. His voice was like a heavy stone sliding over sand. "I have walked these paths for 100 years. I have seen 1,000 men like you, carrying their silver keys and their golden dreams. Then you know the way to the city of silver?" Elias asked, a spark of hope lighting up his tired eyes. The old man laughed, a hollow, sad sound. "The city of silver? My boy, that is a story we tell to keep ourselves moving. There is no city. There are only more rocks, more wind, and eventually, the great mirror." Most people get here and realize they made a mistake. They realize that the Gray Valley was not so bad after all. The man reached into his bag and pulled out a piece of dry bread. He held it out to Elias. "Eat, then turn around. If you go back now, maybe they will let you weave again. Maybe you can forget the key." Elias looked at the bread. Then he looked at the silver key in his hand. It was dull now, covered in the dirt of the road. For a moment, he felt a terrible weight in his chest. He was so tired, he was so alone. He thought about Sarah, he thought about the safety of the gray walls. He almost reached for the bread. He almost said, "Yes, I want to go home." But as his fingers brushed the silver key, he felt a small, sharp spark. It wasn't just heat, it was a memory. He remembered the feeling of the gray wool in his hands and how it felt like death. He realized that the hunger in his stomach was nothing compared to the hunger in his soul. "No," Elias said, his voice stronger than he expected. "I may never find the city, but I would rather die in the wilderness looking for the light than live in a valley where the sun is forbidden. Keep your bread, traveler. I have my own path." The old man sighed and vanished into the mist like a shadow. Elias stood up, his legs shaking with fatigue. He looked toward the highest peak, where the clouds were starting to break, and still, the hardest part of his journey was waiting at the end of the road. He did not know that the mountain ahead held a secret that would challenge everything he believed about his own reflection. The climb to the final peak was a slow torture. The air became thin and freezing. Every breath Elias took felt like swallowing needles. He was no longer walking. He was crawling. His hands were scratched by the ice, and his eyes were blurred by the constant wind. But the silver key was now glowing with a light so fierce it could be seen through his coat. It was guiding him, pulling him toward a massive stone archway at the very top of the mountain. Elias reached the arch and collapsed. He expected to see a city of towers and gold. He expected to hear the music of his dreams. But as he wiped the frost from his eyes and looked up, his heart stopped. There was no city. Beyond the archway was a flat, circular plateau of white stone, and in the center of the plateau stood a giant vertical slab of silver. It was a mirror so tall it seemed to pierce the sky. Elias stood up, his heart heavy with a sudden crushing disappointment. "Where is the city?" he cried out to the empty wind. "I sacrificed everything. I left my home. I crossed the bridge. Where is my destiny?" "Your destiny is standing right in front of you," a voice echoed. Elias turned. Sitting by the base of the mirror was an old woman. She was wearing a robe made of every color Elias had ever dreamed of: reds, blues, greens, and golds. She was the gatekeeper. "The key does not open a gate to a city," she said softly. "The key opens the mirror. But to use it, you must be brave enough to see who you really are." Elias walked toward the mirror. His reflection was terrifying. He saw a man covered in dirt, with torn clothes and a face aged by pain and hunger. He looked like a beggar. He looked like a failure. He looked like exactly what Master Kale said he would become. "I am nothing," Elias whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks. "I am just a broken weaver from a gray valley." "That is what the valley wants you to see," the gatekeeper said. "Now, use the key. Touch the silver." Elias took the key and pressed it against the surface of the mirror. Click. The sound echoed across the mountains. Suddenly, the surface of the mirror changed. It was no longer hard silver. It was like clear, glowing water. Elias looked at his reflection again. But this time, he didn't look at his clothes or his scars. He looked into his own eyes, and there, deep inside his pupils, he saw it. He saw the city of silver. He saw the music, the lights, the colors, and the ancient language. He realized that the city wasn't a place he was going to. The city was a place he was carrying. In that moment, Elias had to make a choice. He could stay outside and remain a beggar, or he could step into his own reflection and become the architect of his own world. "I am not a weaver of gray," he thought, his fear vanishing. "I am the light I have been seeking." He took a deep breath and stepped forward, his body merging with the silver light. The mountain shook, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the sun broke fully through the clouds, turning the entire world into a sea of gold. When Elias stepped through the silver surface of the mirror, he expected to fall. He expected to feel cold water or a hard floor. But instead, he felt weightless. He felt as if he were made of sunlight and music. For a long, beautiful moment, there was no gray, no mist, and no pain. There was only the truth. When he opened his eyes, he was still standing on the mountain peak. But the world had changed because he had changed. The jagged rocks were no longer black and threatening. They sparkled like diamonds. The sky was not a pale gray, but a deep, royal blue that seemed to go on forever. Even his own hands were different. The stains of the loom were gone, replaced by a soft, silver glow that radiated from his skin. He looked down at the Valley of Echoes far below. From this height, he could see the thick, heavy mist still sitting over the village, like a lid on a pot. He could see the tiny figures of the weavers walking to the hall, their eyes fixed firmly on the ground. He felt a wave of deep compassion for them. He realized that Master Kale wasn't evil. He was simply blind. He was a man who had forgotten how to look up. "What do I do now?" Elias asked the gatekeeper. His voice no longer trembled. It sounded like a bell ringing in the clear air. The old woman smiled, her colorful robes dancing in the wind. "The city of silver is not a place you live in, Elias. It is a language you speak. It is a way of seeing. Everywhere you walk from this day forward, the silver will follow you. If you speak with love, the world will turn to gold. If you speak with courage, the mist will vanish." The silver key in his hand began to melt. It turned into liquid light and flowed into his palm, becoming a small, permanent mark, a silver star on his skin. He didn't need to carry the key anymore. He was the key. Elias turned away from his old home and began to walk down the other side of the mountain toward a new land he had never seen. As his boots touched the earth, flowers of vibrant red and purple bloomed in his footsteps. He began to sing, not a song of the looms, but a song of the sun. He was no longer a weaver of gray wool. He was a weaver of destiny. The legend says that Elias traveled to many valleys after that. He spoke to anyone who would listen, teaching them that the world is only as gray as we allow our hearts to be. He taught them that we are not defined by our tools or our traditions, but by the light we choose to carry within us. Now, let us listen to the story of Elias one more time, but more simply. This will help your mind remember the words and the meaning. Elias lived in a very gray place called the Valley of Echoes. In this valley, people did not like color. They did not like change. Every day, Elias worked as a weaver. He made gray cloth on a gray machine. His boss, Master Kale, always told him, "Keep your eyes on the ground." But Elias was different. He had dreams of a city of silver. One morning, he found a silver key in his pocket. This key changed everything. Elias decided to leave the valley. He was tired of the gray life. He wanted to find his destiny. His journey was very difficult. He had to cross a dangerous bridge that broke behind him. He walked through a dark forest where he almost gave up. He was hungry, tired, and cold. An old traveler told him to go back home, but Elias said, no. He chose to keep walking toward the light. Finally, he reached the top of a high mountain. He did not find a city. He found a giant mirror. The gatekeeper told him to use the key. When Elias looked in the mirror, he realized a great secret. The city of silver was not a place. The city was inside him. Elias stepped into the light. He stopped being a gray weaver and became a man of light. He learned that the way we see the world is the world we create. He spent the rest of his life traveling and teaching others to find their own light. Remember, my friend, your destiny is not a place you find. It is the person you choose to become. I remember the smell of the dust. Every morning for 20 years, I woke up to the smell of old stone and dry wool. I was Elias the Weaver. That was my name, and that was my only purpose. In my village, we didn't talk about feeling or dreaming. We talked about the weave. We talked about the gray. I felt like a ghost, living in a world of shadows. I still remember the moment my fingers touched that silver key. It was cold, so cold, it felt like ice. But then, it began to burn. It felt like my heart was waking up from a long, deep sleep. When I looked at that key, I knew I couldn't stay. I looked at Sarah, my dear friend, and I saw the fear in her eyes. I realized then that fear is what keeps the mist alive. People don't stay in the gray because they like it. They stay because they are afraid of the light. When I stood on that bridge and I heard the wood cracking behind me, I felt a terrifying freedom. I had no home. I had no loom. I had nothing but a piece of silver and a hope I couldn't explain. I walked through that dark forest, and there were times when I wanted to lie down and let the cold take me. I heard the voices of the village and the wind, telling me to come back, telling me I was a failure. But the most important moment was standing before that mirror. I looked at myself, and I saw a broken man. I thought I had lost the journey. But the gatekeeper told me to look deeper. When I used the key, I didn't see a new world outside. I saw a new world inside. I realized that I didn't need to find a city of silver. I needed to become a man of silver. Now, as I walk through these new lands, everything is different. I am not translating the world into gray anymore. I am living in the colors. My hands no longer weave wool, they weave hope. I used to be a prisoner of the valley, but now I am the master of my own destiny. And so, we leave Elias as he walks into the golden sunset of a new world. His story is a legend now, whispered in the valleys and sung on the mountain peaks. But why do we tell this story? Why does it matter to us today as we sit here together practicing our English? My dear friend, learning a language is very much like Elias's journey. Sometimes you feel trapped in the gray. You feel like you are just repeating words, memorizing rules, and keeping your eyes on the ground. You might feel like you are just translating your old thoughts into a new language. But English is not just a list of words to learn. It is a new way to see yourself. It is a silver key that opens a door to a bigger world. The moral of our story today is simple, yet very deep. Your destiny is not a place you find. It is the person you choose to become. When you speak English, don't just speak with your mouth. Speak with your heart. Don't be afraid to leave the gray of your mistakes behind. Every time you practice, every time you listen, you are stepping across that bridge. You are moving away from the valley of whispers and toward your own city of silver. You are not just a learner. You are a weaver of your own future. Thank you for spending this time with me today. It has been a joy to tell you this story. If Elias's journey touched your heart, I invite you to leave a comment below. Tell me, what is the silver dream you are chasing in your life right now? If you found this story helpful for your English listening and your soul, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. It helps us create more stories for kind learners like you. Remember to be patient with yourself, keep your heart open, and always look toward the light. Until next time, keep dreaming and keep speaking. Goodbye for now.